old adage that we've all heard time and time again. You are what you eat, right? But the reality through the functional medicine lens is that you are not what you eat. That is a woefully oversimplified truism. In reality, you are what you eat, digest, absorb into systemic circulation, convert to final forms, and get past the cell membrane. This is a much higher hurdle than simply being able to assume that the healthy, nutrient-dense food you put into your mouth is actually going to result in an abundance of micronutrition, making it into your cells. Today, I want to share with you 4 important communities of patients and clients in your practice for whom you want to be sure to question. Is this person getting what they need from their food? Or in fact, is their vitality suffering because of a lack of micronutrition due to maldigestion? Welcome to Functional Medicine for Real World Impact, where we're diving into the complex, interconnected nature of health and disease, exploring not just theory, but practically what it takes to turn functional medicine insight into powerful, practical, real-world results. So please hit subscribe and let's get started. It's true that healthy, nutrient-dense food is one of the most important tools in any practitioner's toolbox. We simply cannot thrive without optimal micronutrition. And it's interesting that so much of the debates and arguments and even infighting that happens within the functional medicine, holistic, integrative medical worlds platforms is about macronutrients. What's the optimal amount of carbohydrates we should be consuming, right? What's the right amount of fat? How much protein is optimal? And indeed, research points, I think, to the truth that it depends on who we're talking about in terms of the macronutrient profile that can help each unique person to thrive. But what we often lose sight of in these nutritional discussions is the fact that all of the body's biochemistry thrives on micronutrition, and that we have to be able to actually bring into our intracellular environments the nutrition that's in our food if we want to thrive. And so I want to talk today about 4 specific communities of people in your practices who are likely struggling from maldigestion. Now, I want to acknowledge that the whole topic of maldigestion is something that a lot of practitioners shirk from because it sounds so basic. We assume that digestion is one of those fundamental human physiological processes that just works without our attention. And I want to acknowledge that so many practitioners are attracted to the latest and greatest sexy science. I get it. The geek in me sees the geek in you. I too am attracted to the novel, the newfangled, the oh so fascinating new discoveries with regard to functional medicine, interconnectedness. But in reality, often what is in the way of our patients and clients experiencing progressive resilient healing from their disease challenges, what's holding them back is something not so sexy, something much more basic or foundational that we as practitioners are overlooking. And so today we want to focus on, yes, the ho-hum topic of digestion. So let's dive right in. First of all, I want to talk about your patients who have acid reflux, GERD. It's an incredibly common challenge today. And indeed, individuals who are suffering from chronic gastroesophageal reflux disease often end up using some sort of intervention, often a medication that suppresses stomach acid. And we need to realize that while that may make their gastric contents more alkaline and therefore less caustic to the esophagus when those juices burble up via the lower esophageal sphincter and they can damage our esophagus. Yes, it makes it more alkaline so that it is less damaging, less pro-inflammatory. The reality is that acid suppressing medications are causing maldigestion on purpose and creating various states of hypochlorhydria. And this might be anything from proton pump inhibitor drugs to H2 receptor blocker drugs, or even something as everyday as a roll of calcium carbonate lozenges that via the alkalinity of the calcium are substantially raising the pH of gastric juices. All of these are creating hypochlorhydria. And the reality is we need good, strong stomach acid in order to have optimal digestion. It is, in fact, the low pH, the acidic environment in the stomach that helps us to denature proteins. Proteins look a lot like a tangled yarn ball of amino acid chains. And when they are clumped together, it's very hard for us to digest them. Ultimately, we need digestive enzymes, especially coming from the pancreas, to be able to get at the individual polypeptide chains in order to cleave them and separate them out in order to enable absorption. But if we don't unwind that tangled yarn ball of polypeptide chains, then digestive enzymes can't be very effective. When we say that acidic gastric juices denature a protein, what we're speaking to is the unwinding of that yarn ball so that it's looser, so that enzymes can more readily get at the polypeptide chains, almost like a pair of little scissors, in order to cleave them to allow for their digestion and then to make their absorption even possible. So we can easily end up maldigesting our protein and losing more of it in our stool, and maybe along the way overfueling various microbial overgrowths because too much of our dietary debris is remaining available for our microbiome. We have to remember that what we don't well digest and make available for absorption is plentiful fodder for our microbial friends to opportunistically overgrow and create various states of dysbiosis and irritable bowel types of dynamics in our intestines. So the bottom line here is we need good, strong stomach acid. And for your patients who have chronic acid reflux, we want to be assessing whether or not they are suffering from maldigestion because of hypochlorhydria. We also need good, strong stomach acid in order to separate minerals from the amino acids that they are bound to in our foods. Again, what we don't well digest is likely to overfeed our microbiome or be lost in the stool. And therefore, I am not what I'm eating. I am not well digesting the food and making it available to bring on board for intracellular nutritional needs. So hypochlorhydria is rampant because of the widespread nature or prevalence of acid reflux. And functional medicine training teaches practitioners how to get at the roots of acid reflux so that the dysfunction goes away and we don't need to manage it with a medication. We don't need to protect the esophageal tissue from the burbling up of the acidic juices from the stomach. And there are many common causes of acid reflux. One of the, again, oh so basic, not so sexy, super foundational concepts is simply that we have terrible eating hygiene in general as an American culture, and certainly in many other Western countries. We don't slow down and chew our food. Many people are inhaling their food. We don't really treat the act of eating as being a sacred time where we have opportunity to optimize digestion. If you think about it, chewing is the only part of digestion that's voluntary. Otherwise, once you chew and swallow, everything else that happens downstream is going to go well or not so well, depending on how much we chewed. And the act of chewing and teaching people the importance of slowing down in order to thoroughly chew their food, but also to allow time for the optimal secretion of digestive substances is a key part of making sure that they are what they eat. This is what we call eating hygiene. And again, not so sexy, but foundational and critically important. It's also a great topic to teach your patients and clients about in workshops and group programs where it can be a lot of fun and certainly they lead to a lot of laughter and shared experience as people practice trying to slow down. Many individuals recount stories from their childhood of needing to chew really quickly or eat really quickly so that they were able to get up from the table to go play, or they were able to snag that second portion of a dish at dinner before their siblings scarfed it up. These are behaviors that we may have locked in place 2, 3, 4, 5 decades ago, but they become part of our mindless norms today. But suffice it to say, we need good, strong stomach acid. We need to eat in a way that allows time for digestive secretions. Just because we chew up a food and swallow it does not mean that we get instantaneous full bolus secretion of digestive substances. It takes time. And so think about your patients and clients who have GERD, who are very likely using a medication that's creating maldigestion on purpose, when you can actually get skilled at addressing the root causes of acid reflux. So the medication is simply not necessary. And it's a really powerful way to create raving fan patients and clients. But that's just the first of the 4 common communities I want you to be aware of. The second one is even bigger. And this is all of your patients and clients who have diabetes, pre-diabetes, entrenched type 2 diabetes, type 1 diabetes, even combination diabetes, latent autoimmune diabetes, LADA. Any of these dynamics that speak to some degree of endocrine pancreatic insufficiency. We need to remember that the pancreas is an incredibly diverse and critical tissue that is not only necessary for producing and excreting insulin to help us with metabolic regulation, but of course the pancreas produces a rich diversity of digestive enzymes. And research shows that when individuals have endocrine pancreatic dysfunction with some type of metabolic disease, they are also much more likely to have exocrine pancreatic insufficiency, meaning they're not putting out an optimal diversity and volume of digestive enzymes. And normally in our pancreatic secretions, we're producing those critical enzymes, or again, those little pairs of scissors, if you will, that are cleaving bonds. That are attaching our nutrition to our food. And so we need the pancreas to be healthy and to support a full complement of amylases, lipases, proteases that are needed to help, again, make sure that we are what we eat, especially as we improve the quality of our diet. Now, this surprises a lot of practitioners because, again, digestion is a ho-hum, boring, basic topic. So we just assume that the pancreas puts out optimal secretions. But research shows that, depending on the study you look at, between 25 and 60% of individuals with some type of diabetes have exocrine pancreatic insufficiency. And even if we have a very healthy gut lining, even if we have good, strong stomach acid, good bile function, we are not going to bring on board our nutrition if we cannot optimally cleave it from our foods. Now, the pancreas can end up suffering from a variety of different insults. In particular, is oxidative stress and damage because of metabolic disease. We know that we can have glycemic damage to all sorts of tissue, to the lining of our arteries, to our nerves, to our kidneys as our blood sugar creeps up because of metabolic dysfunction. But other organs and glands are struggling as well. And the pancreas can certainly suffer from oxidative damage that impairs digestive enzyme synthesis or secretion. We can end up with fatty pancreas, just like we end up with fatty liver or fatty muscles when we are in a hyperinsulinemic state. In the progression of metabolic disease, we end up with excessive fatty infiltration in all sorts of tissues in the body. And just like we can end up with fatty liver, even non-alcoholic fatty liver in the progression of metabolic disease, the pancreas can also struggle with this and become dysfunctional. There can also be progressive autoimmune types of dynamics and other inflammatory dynamics, but always be looking for whether or not there is digestive enzyme insufficiency in your patients and clients who have any type and any degree of diabetes, any type or any degree of endocrine pancreatic insufficiency. Certainly, we can support these individuals in the short term with digestive enzyme supplements. But again, we want to get at the roots and resolve progressively the metabolic disease and also work on supporting the body's ability to emulsify and eliminate the fatty infiltration in key glands. In particular, so that we're getting at the roots of the issue and the pancreas can be restored to its optimal function. But that's just number 2 of the communities in your practice. Even perhaps more common and more insidious because it's often overlooked or undiagnosed is hypothyroidism. As we move from stomach acid in the gastric cavity and digestive enzyme secretions from the pancreas, we need to talk about the gallbladder and the oh so lowly substance of bile. Even more basic, even more foundational. Again, we just assume, right? Bile is just something that the liver makes that's always there, and the gallbladder is such a basic tissue that we often consider it to be expendable. But in truth, for all of its perhaps simple structure, the gallbladder is an essential tissue for concentrating bile into a bolus that can be erupted after a meal in order to help us to emulsify our fats so that we are able to fully digest those fats and isolate fat-soluble vitamins for absorption. So whether it is saturated fat or mono or polyunsaturated fatty acids, but also critical fat-soluble vitamins like A and D and E and K, we need good bile function, and the gallbladder is not optional. The argument is often raised that the liver makes bile, and so it's okay if you remove the gallbladder because the liver is still producing bile and sending it through the hepatic biliary tree. And that is true. But absent a gallbladder, bile enters the duodenum in a steady state drip, 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 drip fashion. No concentration, no bolus, no concentration of emulsification capacity. That is what we really need to optimally digest our food. And so again, we can end up with a situation where we are not what we eat. And your patients and clients who have hypothyroidism, I think especially the more insidious subclinical hypothyroidism, are of concern in this category. At SAFM in our practitioner community, we often laugh about the truth that if you have sluggish thyroid, sluggish anything, maybe sluggish everything in the body, it's not just about constipation or hair loss or weight gain, as though those are the only tissues in the body where cells need thyroid hormone. Of course not. Thyroid hormone is essential for driving the basal metabolic rate of all of our cells in order to help all of our tissues to function optimally. And research shows that hypothyroidism promotes sluggish movement of bile through the biliary tree and poor gallbladder emptying. And this increases the likelihood of the precipitation of gallstones and the potential development downstream of gallbladder disease and cholecystectomy. And certainly for individuals who have already had a cholecystectomy, we really want to be questioning the sufficiency of fat and fat-soluble vitamin digestion, because the vast majority of these individuals are struggling. It's one of the reasons, for example, why someone can be taking a vitamin D supplement, but yet their vitamin D levels are not coming up as sufficiently as you would expect them to based on the dosage that they're taking. Now, there are multiple reasons why vitamin D may not actually make it from the supplement in the mouth or even the sun exposure, right, on the skin into the circulating prohormone that we know is so critical for vitality. But maldigestion is definitely one of the more common ones. So often practitioners just assume, oh, they're taking high dose vitamin D, they're fine. I don't even really need to check it. But frequently we see individuals who are taking large doses of vitamin D, but their levels remain suboptimal or even clinically low. So we can't find what we aren't checking. But we need the concentration of bile. For that matter, there are all sorts of critical functions of bile. It's a critical antimicrobial substance that some of our important commensal bacterial strains have evolved to become resistant to. And in this way, having good bile function and good gallbladder function is actually part of passive immune function in terms of keeping a good balance and diversity in our microbiome. But we need bolus bile entering into the digestive tract in order to make sure that we are what we eat in the arena of fatty acids, especially the essential ones, and also fat soluble vitamins. But those are three communities of people that you want to focus on. We've talked about those with acid reflux, those with type 2 or type 1 or any form of diabetes, and those, especially women with hypothyroidism. We're starting to talk about the vast majority of people in your practice, which means we need to question optimal digestion in every single person in our practice, even if it seems like a basic, not so sexy foundational topic. That is often where the pearls lie and what is keeping your patient or client from progressively healing in a resilient way. But the fourth category is one I don't want you to miss, because these are individuals with aches and pains. And so now for sure, we're talking about everybody in your practice. But chronic aches and pains, and this may be anything from individuals with arthritis to individuals who are dehydrated, which give aches and pains to any of us on a daily basis. Maybe people who have headaches on a regular basis. They are taking non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, NSAIDs, like ibuprofen, on a regular basis, often every day. And I also want to use this as an opportunity to highlight that we really need to do deep, thorough inquiries, because a lot of your clients are using acid-suppressing medications, but they don't think to tell you because it's not a prescription. Or they're taking ibuprofen every day or most days to just head off any type of aches and pains, but they don't think to tell you because it's not a prescription, right? How much could it really matter? We need to be poignantly asking people about these categories of drugs, because if we aren't aware that they're taking them, we cannot educate, inspire, and empower people to understand the impact of those choices. But ibuprofen in particular is quite damaging to the mucosal lining of our intestines. And so individuals who have aches and pains, who have arthritis, who have chronic headaches, who are dehydrated, and they're using these drugs on a regular basis, are likely interfering with the digestive capacity of brush border enzymes. And if you're unfamiliar with this critical part of GI function, think about brush border enzymes as being the last frontier of digestion. So in the lining, especially of our small intestines, we have villi. Right? We know that to maximize the surface area, to optimize digestion, we have all of these folds of tissue on the lining of the small intestines. If you were to stretch it out, it's a huge surface area, which is important to maximize our ability to bring on board nutrients. But even amongst the folds of that tissue, we have just an uncountable number of little finger-like projections called villi, which even further enhances the surface area, right, all along the sides of these villi. But even if we look at one singular villi and at the cells lining the tip of that villus, each of those cells has on it a tiny covering of little microvilli projections. And it's called a brush border because when you look at it microscopically, those little microvilli look like a small, fragile brush. But expressed in those microvilli are a critical family of enzymes that is the last frontier of digestion. And this is where we produce critical enzymes for example, we produce lactase needed to digest the lactose sugar found in milk. We produce sucrase needed to digest the sucrose found in sugar. We produce the DPP4 enzymes that are needed, for example, to help us to digest gluten. Found in wheat and other grains. For that matter, DPP4 enzymes are also critical for metabolic function, for insulin regulation. But that's a topic for another video. But for digestion, we need to have a healthy brush border, which means we need to pay keen attention to what are we putting in our mouths and swallowing that might be damaging those villi, or in particular on an even smaller level, creating oxidative stress and damage to those microvilli, where those enzymes are not going to be optimally expressed, and we are not going to be able to break down at that final frontier our food so that nutrients are small enough that they can actually be absorbed into systemic circulation. And again, what you don't digest well is not available for absorption, which means the nutrition is lost. We are not what we eat in that scenario, and we're missing out on the opportunity to bring on board critical micronutrition. But NSAIDs, and in particular ibuprofen, does damage to the mucosal lining of our intestines and impairs the expression of those brush border enzymes. And so we do not well digest our food in that case. And humans are swallowing all sorts of chemical additives and ingredients that can also create wear and tear on our intestinal mucosa and cause dysfunction in that brush border. And so we've talked about the essential nature of stomach acid, the essential nature of pancreatic enzyme secretion, the essential nature of thorough gallbladder emptying in a bolus, and the essential nature of brush border enzymes. But thinking about individuals in your practice who are presenting with other challenges, chronic acid reflux, some type of diabetes, some type of hypothyroidism, some type of chronic aches and pains or arthritis that would lead them to take a lot of painkiller types of medication. This speaks to the notion of interconnectedness, which is a foundational principle of the functional medicine lens on health and disease. And that if we want to help any patient or client to resolve dysfunction or overt disease and damage in a certain tissue, we never want to look just myopically at that tissue or support only that tissue. We want to take a step back and cast a broader net and look at the system that is creating that localized dysfunction. It's a translational opportunity to apply some of the best of systems engineering concepts to the human body or the human life as a system, because everything is interconnected in our choices. And so the newfangled sexy science is fascinating, and we're going to be talking about those concepts too in this series. But never forget the value, the critical importance of the ho-hum, not so sexy foundational concepts, because they're often in the way of you doing your very best work, helping your patients and clients to get the very best outcome, but also supporting you, serving you, and getting the satisfaction for which you pursue your career. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a great day.